Welcome to Marketplace Live. Let's defy gravity.
Welcome back to Marketplace Live. I'm really excited for this next session that I'm going to be spending with Jayshree Ullal, who is CEO of Arista Networks. Welcome, Jayshree.
It's great to be here, Tony. Thank you.
Absolutely. Maybe to get started, Jayshree, for those in the audience that don't know who Arista is, maybe if you could share a little bit of background on that, that would be great.
Oh, it would be my honor. Arista has been one of the fastest growing networking companies. We're fairly young. We came out with products 12 years ago, and we have really powered some of the world's largest clouds and data centers. And when I mean large, it's truly large, right? So you can build 100 servers, 1,000 servers. These start at hundreds of thousands of servers, millions of virtual machines, and then zettabytes of storage. But then they become an on-ramp to many other types of clouds, including the enterprise and the point of centers and POPs, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those that don't know, I would suggest you do check out Arista Networks. Incredible technology and definitely very visionary. And that's actually a nice segue, Jayshree, to kind of kicking into gear. You know, I kind of put down some notes from our conversation and preparing. And, you know, the first one I wanted to kick off with is I think about our conversations together. And, you know, for those in the audience, you know, I've been privileged to know Jayshree since 2005, and we've been talking about distributed computing ever since. You know, Jayshree, as you kind of think about Arista's position in the industry and its unique perspective of helping some of the largest clouds, largest networks, and largest enterprises in the data center space, you know, maybe you could share your perspective on kind of what's unfolding in the networking space in this new world and paradigm.
That's a really good question. I think back when you and I connected, networking had gotten kind of dull and boring. So I like to think we brought networking back to excitement, you know, got sexy back or whatever you want to say. But the point of the matter here is what really began as a connectivity mission, which was how do you connect everything via a network, has now become a mission critical aspect, right? So when you're bringing this kind of power of compute and storage and containerization and virtualization, and don't forget those mission critical applications, the network isn't the largest point of spend, but it is the biggest point of pressure. And you're looking for 4 or 5 very key attributes. I believe our vision, Arista's vision, and our mutual customers really want a very agile network. They don't care if it's physical, virtual, or containerized. They want to move more to as a service. They want the availability. You can't just bring down a network, and yet you can't build everything in twos. You can't say, let's pair up everything so that if one fails, the other goes down. So agility, availability, automation, analytics, and then a very API and AI driven is really the future. And to do all of that takes a completely new approach. You've got to literally jettison every old school thought you had and come up with a mechanism where your NetOps, your SecOps, your CloudOps, your DevOps are really all coming together. So you got to have cloud architectures for your network, you got to have cloud operations for your network, and then you have to have the right experience, user experience for your network. So there's a lot going on there.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's I like that. I kind of noted, you know, for the audience, it's sort of what I really take away is it's really a convergence of what were different towers kind of coming together operationally. You know, I heard you talk about, you know, the applications, because it's really kind of like a workflow model now. And then the as a service as a paradigm that may have been built in the public cloud, but now I think is moving across all infrastructure. Is that a good summary?
Yeah, no, you know, it's interesting how I think the industry got really wrapped around the word SDN, software defined networking. And I'm a big fan of that. And actually, Arista's software stack, our Arista extensible operating system, is very much software driven. But at the end of the day, software has to land on something. Mm-hmm. So whether you land it on large compute clusters in the public cloud, or whether you land it on a premise, or whether you land it on a digital reality asset, what's important is these workloads can really move around and yet have one single architecture. You don't want 3 network architectures for 3 points in the location, right? So your workloads, whether they're physical, virtual, containerized, whether they're in the premise, whether they're in transit, or whether they're in the cloud, have to have one common model and one common architecture. And I think that's what you and I are striving to do. Not easy, but it must be done so that I like a quote I heard, I don't know from who, but I love it. It says, "It doesn't matter how you build your data centers. It matters how your data is centered." And I think that describes a lot of what you and I do.
Absolutely. Yeah, I appreciate that. It's not easy, but boy, it's powerful. Which kind of puts me to another question that I had for you and to share with the audience is, if we think about what we just talked about, so a unified architecture, a fabric around this connected world, right? If we think in a fabric terms, it's kind of creating connected outcomes. One of the things that I see very exciting with what Arista is doing is you all are enabling some very impressive connected outcomes, whether it's in healthcare, right? Various industries. I'd love for you to share some of that and some of the types of outcomes that can kind of inspire the audience to recognize that when you create this connected fabric and approach, what can be unlocked from an outcome.
No, that's great. I think it's easy to talk about technology, and you and I can do that a lot. And clearly, Arista's built a very disruptive technology. Disruptive at the data plane, at the management plane, at the control plane. But to your point, what does that mean? What's the outcome from that? So for example, one of our earliest outcomes was in the high-frequency trading, where every bit and byte of latency really counted, right? You can drive a packet really, really fast at 100 megabits or 100 gigabits or 400 gigabits these days. But how do you do that in a predictable fashion where every nanosecond really matters in terms of your electronic trading? In fact, I think every nanosecond we shave yields millions of dollars for our customers, so it becomes very important. So it's not just how fast you send the packet, it's how predictably you send the packet. And let's say these workloads reside in the cloud, then what's the round-trip jitter? What's the latency from moving from a VPC or a VNet that's in the cloud to your financial high-frequency trading network? So what we've seen a lot of is not just the ultra-low latency, but the ability to measure the jitter, tell you the watermark. Hey, your applications are consuming too much latency. I'm going to give you a warning so that you can do something about it. And so the round-trip delays of the packet is one thing, but the warnings and proactive, what we call cloud tracer information, is another. So as important as moving bits is back and forth, violating the laws of physics is important. Giving you the warnings and alerts is just as important. And that monitoring and analytics, it's very hard to do at low speed, let alone high speed. And deducing the false positives and the false negatives is very key too. So that's a really good example. Another one you pointed out is in healthcare. It is unbelievable to me how healthcare has become such a massive explosion of devices. I don't even know if I can call it a data center. It's a health IT center, right? Where one user equals so many machines. You can have your iPhone, your iWatch, your laptop, but you can also have Internet of Things and devices for imaging and measuring your heart rate, your blood samples. So with that kind of connectivity, that proliferation really requires you to look at a unified edge. And that unified edge could be your east-west traffic in a data center or even in a campus. And bringing the wired and wireless as equal citizens couldn't be more important than it is now. And so many healthcares are going through that, where they're not snaking in and out of different controllers and different parts, and really bringing SDN to work by bringing that cognitive AI-driven edge for different types of interfaces. So you hear the word east-west or north-south in terms of traffic, but Arista really pioneered leaf-spine architectures. And the idea was, if you can build that amazing super-powered spine, you can connect any leaf. It doesn't just have to be an Arista leaf. It could be a storage leaf, a Wi-Fi leaf, a 5G leaf, another vendor's leaf, and this is really our vision for great networking.
Yeah, that's it's exciting. It's kind of like going back to, which for the audience, that's where Jayshree and I first intersected, was when I was in the Wall Street space. It's almost like, Jayshree, that what Wall Street figured out in electronic trading was the digitization of the business process end to end, right? So sort of from ideation, opportunity, quote, cash, execution kind of thing. And you think about what's happening in healthcare. You pick any industry right now, and you think about how, with the world being able to remove physical barriers and connect to anywhere and connect to anything, it's really kind of, now it becomes why that architecture is so important, which kind of sets me up for the next question, which is really, we were talking about digital transformation, and we're talking about kind of how Arista's sharing a vision, folks, of unpacking, right, an end-to-end networked paradigm that allows business processes that couldn't operate before to operate now, both at the right speed. And I also heard predictability from Jayshree. This is really translating to, and you said it, Jayshree, an explosion in data. And the theme for the event and what we've launched is the Data Gravity Index, which is really where we believe our vision for the world is it needs to be connected, like we've talked about, and it also needs to become data-centric, right? Because there's opportunities sitting in the data that if you can get the right data with the right analysis, to the right folks, then intelligence starts to really permeate. From an Arista standpoint, how are you seeing it with your customers in IT architectures, whether it's the service providers that you enable to deliver to the enterprise, or the enterprise customers you have? Because you sit in a unique position where you see both also. Any thoughts?
No, absolutely. The industry likes to talk in terms of underlays and overlays. And again, I think that's a technology view. As I said, we tend to talk of it as programmable data planes, management planes, control planes. But if you step back and say, okay, that's great on the technology side, Tony and Jayshree, but what does it really mean to us, right? Which is really the question you're asking. At the heart of it is exactly what you said. You have to build a data-driven architecture. And data-driven, by the way, includes workloads. It also includes very large workflows like video. We're living in a very collaborated world today. And it wasn't until 5 years ago that you only had, a few billion workflows or video streams. Today in 2020, particularly with the onset of COVID, we really have over 1 trillion workflows. Data and the way we consume it, whether it is in voice, video, or data traffic, is just, very much a central part of all of us. So what's important to do is not just deliver pipes like we described, but deliver the right mechanisms for these pipes. Can I identify the application? Can I identify the user? Can I prioritize a multi-tenant set of users so that groups of certain users can talk to another set of groups? But at the same time, I can create the right segments. At the end of the day, networking is a segmentation problem, but it's also an encryption problem, it's a threat detection problem, and it's an encryption problem as well. So really, I think security and networking and the billions of workflows we're all sending together are coming very much in an intersection or union. I like to think of it as security is no more just a noun where you're looking at cyber threats, but you really have to bring this as a proactive suite of machine learning or AI-driven activities so that you can detect the threat before it happens. So I think this is even more profound than we realize. We started out as a connectivity problem, now we've gone to an architectural problem, and then now it'll be a contextual and cognitive problem as well.
Yeah, that's a lot of nuggets and insights there. I kind of made a couple of notes, and maybe unpacking a little bit more. I really like the fact that for the audience and for the industry as a whole to think about the statement that Jayshree just made about trillions of workflows. And then you think about trillions of workflows that just even the metadata associated with it, right, is very cumbersome if you don't architect it right. One of the things that as I was listening to you is there's actually two takeaways that I had. One was I really feel that what you're saying and what we're talking about here is really that infrastructure is becoming critical to the business architecture versus where it used to be a support function. I think it's the actual enablement function of the business architecture. I'd love to get your thoughts on that one.
That's a really good point.
Secondly, I'd love to hear, you're hitting on cognitive, and I think Arista talks a little bit more about and has a vision around cognitive networking. I would love to how does that kind of unpack on both of those in your thought?
Yeah. Now let's take your first one because remind me again, before the cognitive, you asked me a question. You said,
do you feel, yeah, sorry, I got all excited with what you were saying. That what used to be the infrastructure architecture used to be more of a support function.
yeah.
Now I envision it, or I see it listening to what you're talking about, what we're hitting on here is actually part of an enablement function of the business architecture. So it really is the business architecture underpinnings. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, totally. I think infrastructure, when you and I met, was absolutely about plumbing. And but now it's really about smart plumbing or intelligent plumbing. Let's look at the three architectures again. If you look at a traditional data center, you have your applications running on physical servers and storage. Well, infrastructure has to support that. If you look at the other extreme of cloud-based data centers, you have basically cloud-native apps running on virtual instances or containerized. And then in between, you typically have a private cloud that does a hybrid combination of both. What, like I said, you don't want is to have three different sets of applications, three different types of networks, and you really have to bring, like you said, this metadata. This is actually why Arista was founded, right? Arista's EOS is not based on inter-process communication, where if one process fails, it takes everything down with it, right? This is the old, since we're in the holiday season, it's the Christmas tree light problem, where one light fails, everything goes down with it, right? But if you build this publish subscribe meta database, where you store real-time, the active state, almost like a directory, of all these pieces of information. If one fails, I can automatically detect which one failed. I can bring it down. I can replace it with an active agent again. And you as an operator never have to touch anything. This is my dream, and this is why cloud networking is so powerful. It can do that. You don't have to set up a patch and a real-time window where you have to bring the network down and raise it up. And no one else in the industry can do this. It's been done, by the way, in high-performance database systems and Unix workstations, high-performance Unix systems, distributed workflows, but never been done in networking. And as you know, the networking is so mission critical. If you don't do it there, then you're going to bring everything down along with it. So I absolutely believe this highly distributed publish-subscribe model is not only the way to go, it's the only way to go if you want to build the right architecture. And the word cognitive then adds a level of intelligence to this database or metadata problem. Because just because you build a leaf-spine architecture and you can create massive amounts of bandwidth doesn't mean you've solved the problem of who gets what. Yeah. And whether it's the right inference engine or ML, machine learning, or you have to actually decide which groups of users are associated with which workloads or are associated with which devices. Now that becomes the intelligence you as a management entity can add. Now if you look at network management again, 10 years ago, it was all polling. You and I lived on SNMP. You come to each port and you say, are you there? How are you? Are you well? Today, you can do that through very automated change control. I should be able to type into thousands of ports, set up a configuration on a Monday, and change all of them with one click of a button with a time series database that can keep, again, track of all of these assets real time. This is the power of what we can do today. Because at the end of the day, I don't know about you, but I've yet to meet organizations where they keep saying, we'll give you more staff to do it. So since you don't get more staff to do it, we really need to build the cognitive intelligence and the technology to do it, and let the staff use their human brains for higher level thought, while the repetitive functions can be done by the technology itself.
Yeah, that's cool. So it's almost like, and that's why I thought it was good to kind of unpack the cognitive, is so that instead of it being a static reactive network, maybe another way of saying the old ways, you're now talking about a dynamic, intelligent network where state change and in real time kind of sense and respond is happening. And I think that becomes very powerful for all of us to think about. And, that's why we challenge people to think about it from a workflow lens, because there's a bunch of discrete workloads, but it's when the workloads that have interdependencies, either upstream or downstream, right, come together, that's where there's opportunity to drive new outcomes. And I think for those that are of the IT space sitting in the, in the audience, this is an opportunity. What you're hearing from Jayshree is, and what Arista is doing is a way to elevate the importance of the network and enabling new business capabilities. And I think that becomes something that all of us need to think about in this new normal of a world that we live in, because it's going to be more dynamic, it's going to be more fluid, it's going to be more volatile, which requires a critical dependency. And I like the fact that what Jayshree's hitting on is she's, in saying that, hey, it's not going to be with a bunch of newer people, but it's freed the people up to say, well, let's think about new types of business processes, new types of flows of how infrastructure can do that sense and respond, that can be programmatized as rules, programmatized, right, as workflows, et cetera. So really a lot of goodness there.
Maybe I'm very excited.
I'm sorry, Jayshree?
I said I'm very excited about the potential of this, right? Because you can develop technology, but the use cases are just exploding, and sometimes there are things here that we didn't even think of. When you think of, the inference capabilities that we can automate, and then combine that with the human expertise, now you get a real combination of 1 + 1 is no more 2. It's 10. Yeah.
Yep, 3 to 5. I agree. 1 + 1 is 3 to 5. So sort of maybe, let's kind of now take it back down for a second. Your definition, Arista's definition and view of what is hybrid IT, and because I think one of the things that all of us can do is industry stewards is helping people with definitions. I already heard you talk about segmentation and multi-tenancy, right? Which means to me, in simple terms, I'm on both different sides of a firewall of who owns what, but participating together. As you kind of go through, or you have separations of duty, types of things. So can you kind of unpack hybrid IT, how you all think about it and define it, and how should the audience be thinking about hybrid IT, hybrid cloud, hybrid networking, hybrid whatever, would probably be a good one.
Yeah, no, I think you have to think of it at least across 3 levels. The first is if you're a CIO today, what is your cloud strategy, right? So hybrid IT didn't use the word cloud, but almost every IT probably has a proprietary suite of mainframe applications that they have to run.
Yep.
But there's a set of workloads they have to move to the public cloud. So right there, they've got a dichotomy, right? So you start with your applications and say, what workloads really make sense for me to move to the cloud because they're repetitive and my team doesn't add any value to it? And then which ones should I be protecting the assets of because they're proprietary or they really run my business and the cloud can't do it as well? So I think the first thing you look at is at a mega level, what are my IT assets and which ones belong where, right? Then the second thing you look at is, okay, as a result of that, remember, just because you throw your assets to the cloud doesn't mean everything just happens, magically. There's a consumption model here where you have to say, okay, what's my budget for hybrid IT? Because it may look cheap initially, but as I start to consume more and more workloads, I remember a financial that ended up spending initially $600,000 a month on moving their workloads to the cloud. And then because they just kept throwing more and more workloads in the cloud, it suddenly became $6 million a month. And before you know it, you've spent $72 million without ever owning any of the assets. So to me, hybrid IT is also what do you own and what do you rent, right? So there's a financial decision over there because you don't want to just say I'm spinning everything up in the cloud unless you're a small company. So it might be 6 of one and half a dozen of another, where you have to again decide what devices and applications you protect and what consumption model do you go with. And the third one that I mentioned a little bit, but I think is becoming more and more important is, you could throw firewalls everywhere, and the role of cybersecurity is very strategic. But again, the perimeters are changing. Everything's blurring. The perimeter is collapsing. So what's the cloud? What's the boundary? What's your IoT? What's your OT? Who knows, right? So if your cloud and the boundaries are blurring, then you need a very thoughtful, layered security strategy, which is how do you segment your network? How do you encrypt certain pieces? And how do you apply the right firewall enforcements where you need them, or the right malware and threat hunting services where you need them? So kind of have to look at this in terms of segmentation as a foundational technology, and then the right levels of security as your overlay. And that to me is what hybrid IT is. It's a combination of technologies, methodologies, and security to keep your now global network that's running all the way from your premise to the cloud working.
That's excellent. I like that. Technology, methodology and security is probably a really good paradigm for all of us to shepherd in. Another great nugget. Thank you. Maybe that kind of shift and pivot. I believe that Arista acquired a company called Awake recently in the security space. Does this mean that blurring line is also reflective in your business model as it kind of unfolds of network and security kind of go hand in hand? Could you tell us more?
Yeah, no, I think this is our first entry into security, and Awake Security it's a company that really drew our attention and enthusiasm and excitement for 3 reasons. Everybody talks about AI. These guys really have AI-driven predictive models to detect the false positives and false negatives in threat hunting. Because, in cybersecurity, you can have lots of devices. Many of them are unmanaged, but the malware can be detecting a lot of false positives or false negatives. So this is the first time we really found an AI-driven, human-driven mechanism where you can hunt threats in a way that is twice as good as anything we'd seen and 1,500% better than any of the false positives. So this kind of threat detection, that's autonomous threat hunting, combining both AI and human expertise, we'd never seen before. So we were just blown away by the technology. And I think good technology, good culture, and good people really define an acquisition for us. And that's what drew us to this security company. But perhaps the most important thing that drew us, besides the great team and technology, was the confluence of the network and the security. Arista's been very good at the networking piece. Awake, we were awakened to the Awake technology, if you will, by their very good network detection and response capabilities. And so if you look at the Gartner analysis, they talk about the security operational control triad. How do you log the right security operations with SIEMs like Splunk? How do you do endpoint detection with companies like CrowdStrike or SentinelOne or Carbon Black? And then how do you do the right network detection? So we felt Arista was entering security through our strength with the network detection, complementing the rest of the SOC as well with a Splunk or a CrowdStrike.
Yeah, that's powerful, and kudos to you and the team there. I think you're onto something. I think anything that can take it from the reactive to the proactive is probably what all of us can. The more we can think holistically as an industry, enterprises, service providers, and come together.
It's so true, because when I think of security in my many jobs before, it's like a game of whack-a-mole. Yeah. Right? You whack one threat and then something else comes in. So unless you take a systematic approach and do it in a network-wide basis, you'll always be whacking. Yeah. Whacking the hack.
So very technical term from Jayshree Ullal, whack-a-mole, right? Just you got it, it's whack-a-mole. No, which is, that's why I applaud you all for it, and for all of us to think that way in the industry is it goes back to that holistic architecture that we started out with earlier. Here it is coming full circle of it's intelligent, it's programmatic, it senses and responds, and now it converges security and the network together, because if we can't drive it, then bad behavior from bad actors prevents the greatness of what digital technology, right, can do for the world. So I applaud you, Jayshree, on that. Maybe just watching time, two more questions. One, as you sort of look at the connectedness and for the audience who are sitting, and looking at providers like ourselves in the multi-tenant data center space, kind of how do you view the role of the multi-tenant data center provider, and just any advice you have for the audience?
No, I think you talked a lot about this transformation, and this transformation goes beyond Arista's participation, which has historically been intra-data center, and now it's exploding inter-data center. what I'm really seeing, if I step back and look at this beyond Arista and digital reality, is, these assets are now becoming from silos, which used to be places in the network, to really places in the cloud, where this cloud architecture is not just for cloud guys anymore. They can come in different consumption models, but think of what's happening. The local area network, the wide area network, the storage area network, the metropolitan area network, the LAN, the WAN, the SAN, the MAN, they're all coming together. And the traffic patterns, whether they're east-west or north-south, have to be a universal spine architecture. And then the consumption model of this can vary. You may have a campus leaf spine, you may have a data center leaf spine. So this is profound for the industry. What this means is that there are really three types of places in the cloud. There's the very large, super large cloud networks you can build where you think in zettabytes of storage. Then there's the best of breed in the enterprise. And then there's the converged I/O where you may not even see the network. It may be hidden inside a compute or a storage machine, right? And you all get to play in all three of them because you have to move the workloads across all of it. And that's our responsibility together.
Yeah, absolutely. And we take that responsibility seriously, and we're grateful to work with firms like yourselves. Maybe in wrapping here, it's a digital workplace world. It's a new norm. Any kind of thoughts that you have on this kind of, we will overcome COVID, right? As a world, we will get healthy. We will operate again. What as IT and leaders and service providers sitting helping IT, what's your advice to all of us as we think about the digital workplace, and kind of any parting thoughts that you have?
Well, my parting thought, first of all, since we are living in this COVID world, is everyone needs to be safe. And I hope you're all enjoying the time at home with your family or the work from home. It's completely changed the way we all live, learn, locate, right? And all of us have had to adapt, not just our jobs, but the way we build our products, the way we offer our products, the way we service our customers. It's with much less eyeball contact, but work must still go on, right? So I would leave you with the fact that adapting to this new world, this once-in-a-100-year pandemic, has perhaps taught us a few lessons that we've all learned. I'll give you our example. As we built our products for Wi-Fi, we said, okay, great. Let's put in a quality of experience that prioritizes the Zoom traffic or the Google Meets or the Microsoft Teams or even the WebEx. We can do that today over our Wi-Fi networks. So I leave you with the fact that if there's one change at all times, that's, it's change. It's the change of the network, change of the apps, and it's our job to adapt to that change and respond accordingly. So campuses suddenly moved in COVID from being carpeted buildings to highly distributed environments. Data centers suddenly moved from just one cloud data center to different types of clouds. It may be a big data cloud, it may be a video cloud, it may be a broadcast cloud, it may be a specialty ERP cloud. So the one word I'll leave you all with is adapt and build flexible technologies, because the one thing you'll have to do is change. That's what digital transformation is all about, transforming and recalibrating ourselves.
Oh, that's excellent. And for the audience, I hope you all take away the goodness of thinking about the power of a network, how unlocking new outcomes through a more converged, holistic, strategic approach to networking and infrastructure. And please engage both of our firms if you think we can even help you ideate. And with that, Jayshree, thank you so much.
Thank you, Tony.
Best wishes of safe and healthy to health and happiness to your family and your company, and to the audience themselves. The same goes for you, and please let us know what we can do to help. With that, I thank you all, and take care.